We are Rogue Media Sports.
It's one thing falling in love with a house, picturing yourself moving in and calling it home, and quite another navigating the world of price negotiating, mortgage lenders, and finding the budget that works best for you. An agent who's a Realtor can make understanding that world easier. Realtors have the expertise, access to proprietary data, and tools to help you get from imagining living somewhere to actually doing it. That's the kind of help we can provide. Because that's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over for dinner with free delivery with no hidden fees or markups. That's groceries, plus napkins, plus that vegetable chopper to make things a bit easier. Plus, members save on gas to go meet them in their neck of the woods. Plus, when you're ready for the ultimate sign of friendship, start a show together with your included Paramount Plus subscription. Walmart Plus members save on this plus so much more. Start a 30-day free trial at walmartplus.com. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. See Walmart Plus terms and conditions.
And it is time for another Doomsday podcast. It's a special holiday edition, the Friday after another Cowboys loss, 92-22 over these last three games. Ed Werder joining me, Matt Mosley.
And it hasn't been that close.
That's right, the score.
If the Chargers hadn't had the decency on Thanksgiving Day to take a knee at the end of the game when they were in position to score, and if the last two teams they've played hadn't lost their kickers during the game, there's no telling what that score would have been cumulatively.
I'm with you, and that's a funny thing that keeps coming up. And, boy, you just heard Ed's voice. Ed did not wait long. He didn't even wait for his introduction. But 3-0 at halftime. There is the head coach seems to take pride in, well, we're in these games at halftime. And to the point you just made, Ed, I mean, for some reason, this crazy thing keeps happening with opposing kickers. The only reason it was 3-0 is because the Chargers were in a strange spot where they're having to go for it on 4th and long because they don't have anybody who can come in and make a kick at
Nick
that
Novak
point.
Got hurt during the game.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And he had obviously missed a short field goal before that, and then he was in the locker room having his injury assessed, and they got in a position where, hey, it's 4th down, we're in position to kick an easy field goal again, but our kicker's not on the field, so let's just go for it. And they didn't make it, so that could have further made it worse for Dallas.
Yeah, it continues to be an immense struggle for this team as the Cowboys fall to 5-6. And I know, Ed, you made a certain promise to folks, and we want to get to that. What was it you put on Twitter?
On social media, after engaging quite a few misguided and disappointed Cowboys fans, I promised that if they wanted to blame somebody responsible for this failure, a single individual to hold culpable, that I would identify that person for them. And I'm going to do that, but not just yet.
Frito, I want to get to this, so if you would, sir, play the music. And it is time. Ed Werder, boy, you teased us, and you teased it so well. And on the heels of a Cowboys 28-6 loss on Thanksgiving Day, just the embarrassment of going out there on such a holiday in front of that sold-out crowd and then not even being in the game in the second half. And for the first time, Ed, I would say I can't recall ever being at a game where a team was down 3-0 and felt like they weren't in the game. Like, that's a strange feeling. That's kind of what it felt like. That's how inept this offense is. But I think we're all waiting in your Twitter audience. And, boy, Ed, you are very active on Twitter and have a lot of folks who follow you there. You teased that there's one person that deserves the most blame for that loss. Ed, are you ready to share that with us?
Just about. First, I would like to do two things. One of which is,
I knew you weren't going to work with me, but go ahead.
I'm working with you. I'm keeping people in suspense. That's a good thing to do. That's one of the tricks I learned in television. But I wanted to point out, first of all, we're in a unique position to make the observations and analyze the game in the way that we are, because this marks the first time this season that you and I were both in attendance working the game from different vantage points. You were in the press box.
Yes.
With your Dallas Morning News responsibilities and your credential allowing that access. And I was on the field in the bench areas. covering the game for Westwood One as a sideline reporter. So I think more than ever, our opinions are direct and justifiable. So here's a couple things. I want to do.
I never feel the need to justify anything.
We need a laugh track. Anyway, the first thing I think we should do is put this performance into historic context, because this was, by any measure, failure at an epic level, especially on offense. This is the first time since the Cowboys were an expansion franchise that they've lost 3 straight games by 20 points. It's the first time in the history of the organization they've scored fewer than 10 points in 3 consecutive games. Now, let's remember, Tom Landry inherited an expansion franchise in 1960, and they went 0-11-1. They didn't win a single game, and they didn't fail like this. Jimmy Johnson, his first team, 1-15.
Yeah.
They didn't fail like this. And neither did the team that quit on Wade Phillips, that led Jerry Jones to fire a coach in the middle of a season for the first time. No Cowboys team in history has failed like this team has without Ezekiel Elliott. And I asked Jerry Jones after the game in the hallway outside the locker room how surprised he is that Dak Prescott and the offense have failed so completely. And he said, hey, I'm surprised. We all know it shouldn't be that way. Zeke's important. Zeke makes it better. But to a man around here, we'd all say it shouldn't be to this degree at all. I then asked him about his remaining faith in Prescott and whether it's been diminished. And he said, no, not at all. He's our future. I saw nothing today, last week, or the week before to compromise my thoughts about his future. So first of all, we need to take those comments apart and address them in the proper context and see what it really is that Jerry is suggesting there and who he's blaming for this. But I think if you want to blame one person for this historic failure, then that person is easily identifiable. And it's not Jerry Jones and it's not Jason Garrett. It's the running back that they both built this team around, and the one they didn't have the past 3 weeks, and the one they won't have for the next 3 weeks. So let's put this all where it belongs, on a player who put himself ahead of 52 other guys in the locker room and on the football field who are so completely lost without him. This belongs to Ezekiel Elliott.
Whoa. Oh, there it is. There it is. Now, can Zeke hear this, Ed, from Cabo? Do you think
it'll be translated into Spanish for him, and some lovely senorita can explain to him what I've just said?
Yeah. I think he will listen. He'll download, and there he is in Cabo. It is interesting you would say that. I think you made some points last week that suggested that perhaps some other teams are able to overcome missing certain players, and the Cowboys do not seem uniquely built to handle the missing of this one player. Now, I think we all agree this is one of the most special players in the NFL. And so he did put himself in this situation. And so to your point, I would just say, any sort of thought that where he's sort of become the victim in all of this. And
which is how he's been portrayed by the owner of the team.
I think that is true. I think Jerry believes that the commissioner's out of control, and to try to illustrate that, he has tried to say, can you believe what has happened to this young man? And I think that's laughable, considering everything we've read, all the evidence. If people want to sort of read a bunch of evidence and see what the courts had, and, it's all out there. It's all a public record. And so, interesting point by you that the man in Cabo right now is the reason the Cowboys are. Now, I would add to that, and I said this yesterday. I wrote this, Ed, after the game, and I would say that there is a scenario I see playing out that Jason Garrett could coach himself out of a job. And the scenario I see is them getting to 5-9 without Zeke, without the man that you were saying is responsible for all of this. And I think the lack of any sort of offensive imagination. Now, the more likely scenario, Ed, is somebody gets thrown overboard. We know how this works. The head coach isn't always the one to go first. So this could be a Scott Linehan situation. But I am not ruling out a Jason Garrett firing for this season. at this point, Ed, at 5-6, where the Cowboys sit, do you think Jason is safe, really, no matter what happens?
Well, I'm going to go back and look at what the comments we just heard from Jerry Jones, which is we all know it shouldn't be that way. Zeke makes us better. To a man, we'd all say it shouldn't be to this degree at all. So Jerry Jones is the one who runs the football operation. He'll proudly tell you in better times. He's responsible as a general manager for the personnel department, for the decisions they've made, for the roster they have, for the injuries that they're supposed to be able to overcome that other teams do. We've seen it in Philadelphia this year. We've seen it in Minnesota right now. We saw it in New England last year. They won without Tom Brady, for God's sakes. They won without Gronk on the field. They're winning without Julian Edelman and Hightower right now. Good teams and good rosters are not this reliant on one player. And I'm the one who predicted that this was going to happen, that they were doomed without Ezekiel Elliott. And if you look at what they were doing when they had Zeke Elliott, remember they were putting together a historic stretch of 30-point games, right? Then they lose the guy and they can't score at all. At all. 2 touchdowns in 2 games. One of them the result of a 21-yard drive. So is Jason Garrett vulnerable? I'd say no, unless this team that showed up the last 3 weeks, if that team shows up the rest of the year every week, they won't win another game, and Jerry will have to fire Jason Garrett in that situation 1 year after he was the coach of the year. As it stands, I think Rod Marinelli, the defensive coordinator, has got to be in some kind of jeopardy. But given what's happened, given that this team's built to win with its offense, I think that's going to be a hard sell for Jerry and Jason if they decide, hey, let's make Rod Marinelli the scapegoat here. People aren't going to accept that. They view this as an offensive problem. And I'm not sure they're going to accept Scott Linehan, and I'm not sure that's where the blame really belongs, as I've already said. I blame Jerry for the roster, and I blame Zeke Elliott for not being there when his team is playing the most important games of the year. And, you have to blame Jason Garrett. He's responsible for both sides of the ball, and both sides of the ball have failed historically. And they knew. This is not like Zeke Elliott got hurt and they weren't prepared. This isn't like Zeke Elliott suddenly got suspended and they didn't know it was happening. They should have been prepared for this inevitability.
Mm-hmm. By the way, one of the and we saw the running back that Eagles brought in, Ajayi. He came in and made
got him at the
impact.
trading deadline.
Yeah, got him at the trade deadline. The Cowboys literally have talked about. Think about this. I had somebody call in last night just to my personal phone. It wasn't like they called into the radio station. They were able to obtain my cell phone, and he said, my nephew has a question, and he passed it over to his, and I was on deadline, and I said, okay, make this quick. And the question was, and I thought this was a good one. Why is Darren McFadden, why can't he be active for a game? Like, that was part of the plan, was to keep him fresh.
Jerry said that very
practice.
Specifically.
Yeah.
We are keeping him healthy and inactive, so if we lose Ezekiel Elliott, here comes Darren McFadden.
And he hasn't been active yet.
He's been active for one game. And he had one carry in the Atlanta game for like minus 2 yards. Yeah. He's not been active since. They physically active. They cite a numbers game. I don't think he's broken a sweat. I think it's fair to say at this point.
So there was no real plan there. The plan was, hey, maybe Alfred can do it. Oh, on these third and shorts or fourth and short, Rod's kind of a big dude. Maybe we can get him out there and moving around a little bit. And everything has failed. Now let's take on a couple of different things. One thing I'd like to do is deal straight with the quarterback. And I don't think there are two bigger Dak Prescott fans in terms of his character, his leadership abilities. I think you and I have been there.
Investment, I think, that he makes to prepare himself for
Correct.
games.
Yeah, and he's a man with a lot of endorsements. Boy, those endorsements, by the way, those always are fun until you start losing, and then it's like, ooh, why is that happening? And so he's going through a very difficult stretch right now, and he's being exposed in some ways. And in one way is that the guy you put a lot of the blame on, Zeke Elliott, it's looking like without Zeke Elliott, he's really, we wondered last year, how much of this is Dak? How much of this is Zeke? And I think we ended up, I don't know where you ended up on that. I ended up sort of like, well, they go hand in hand. They've both been great. And I think that's true to some certain extent. I think we know now that without Zeke Elliott, and now there's a coaching failure involved in this too. But even though I love the guy, he's lost right now. He's got no chemistry with Dez Bryant, the alleged elite receiver. He can't get the ball downfield. I mean, Ed, you're down there on the sideline. I mean, as much as Jason Witten is unbelievable and he's a Hall of Famer, you're throwing the ball 3 or 4 yards short of the sticks to Witten and hoping he can somehow maneuver around 2 defenders. There's no chance. Like, that was what the offense was yesterday.
The Cowboys going into this game ranked dead last in the NFL in yards after catch. That takes every position into consideration. Receivers, running backs, tight ends. They do nothing with the football after they catch it, assuming they catch it. They're from what I understand, in asking people what is Dak Prescott seeing when he's in the pocket, they'll tell you that their opinion is he sees very little separation. Now, a quarterback like Tony Romo has a proven ability to throw people open, and that's what this league requires. You know, I remember Steve Young in one of the years where quarterbacks were being taken high in the draft, and he said, somebody asked me, what's the difference between major college football and pro football? And he said, in college football, everybody's open. And in pro football, nobody's open. You have to throw them open. Well, one of the things that's unique about Dak Prescott until the past 2 weeks is that he seldom put the ball at risk. And talking to coaches yesterday, that's part of the equation here. The receivers are not creating separation. So when Dak looks at them, for example, Dez, he sees a receiver that to him, in his mind, in his experience, is a covered player. That's a risky throw and one that generally he will not make. So now he winds up holding the football, and now all he finds is other receivers who are in much the same situation. And where Romo would be willing to risk the football and give his guys a chance, Dak doesn't do that. Now, we've seen what happens when he lowers his standard and is forced by the situation in the game to throw the football, whether the receiver's open or not. And what has it led to? 8 turnovers in 3 games. 2 turnovers returned for touchdowns. Look, would I be concerned about Dak Prescott? Yes. But I go back to the fact that when he had Elliott, 3 weeks ago, he was playing like one of the top 5 quarterbacks in football. So, yeah, he's suffering from the absence of the best player that the Cowboys have. Zeke Elliott is the only guy who defensive coordinators fear can score from anywhere on the field. And he can score whether you hand it to him or he can score whether you throw it to him. We've seen it happen. There's a fear in the league when Zeke is on the field that doesn't exist when he's not. Now, people want to say, hey, this guy's never going to be what Romo was. I would just say, let's keep in mind, Romo wasn't even playing at this point in his career. Romo sat and had the benefit of making his mistakes in practice. Dak Prescott's had to do that in the highest possible profile games there are. So to say that he can't be what Romo was, I don't know if he'll ever be the passer that Romo was. I can see why you would think that's not going to happen, but let's give the guy a chance. And right now, his teammates and his coaches, they're not giving him a very good chance.
You know how some of these head coaches in the league, a couple of them were former Cowboys assistants, like Todd Haley had this happen with the Chiefs, and Tony Sparano had this happen with Miami. They were sort of victims of their own success. They immediately went like 10-6 or 11-5 in their first year, and the second year they probably had what they probably should have done in the first year, and it's like, what happened? And they both end up getting fired. I mean, that's kind of happened to Prescott a little bit. He was
a victim of his own expectations.
Amazing that now. So in a sense, he's having right now. He's a little bit having like Carson Wentz's rookie year. But Carson Wentz, nobody really panicked. Everybody's like, well, he's going to go through some stuff.
He wasn't even supposed to be playing. Like, if they hadn't gotten fortunate and unloaded Sam Bradford on the Vikings, Carson Wentz, they were talking about he might not even get in his uniform as a third quarterback his rookie year.
So they saw enough flashes from him to go, I think he'll be okay. I think he's going to be a good one. But they were able to sort of be – Dak was so good, and they won so many games with him. And then, of course, they didn't bring back Romo once he was healthy because Dak had such a great run. And Romo goes off into the sunset to be a broadcaster, and all of a sudden there is no – it's like, wait, this guy's not perfect? This guy's not going to go every season and only throw 2 or 3 interceptions and win 13 games? I think some of that's setting in. And quite honestly, it's up to the coaches to help him get through to this deal. And right now, I don't see them helping him that much.
He's not getting any help. And the two interceptions he threw on back-to-back possessions yesterday, those were terrible decisions. He misread the coverage. He overestimated his own ability moving left to throw a ball sort of slightly back to his right. The other one, I think he just never – the Casey Hayward play, I don't think he ever saw the coverage correctly and thought he had a receiver that was not really open. But, I mean, this guy is a player who's, like we said, he's fully committed to the job. You know, you can certainly criticize some other people, and I just did with Zeke Elliott. He's not committed the way that Dak Prescott is committed. So this guy has a skill set, and it's up to the coaches to make better use of it. And I don't think you want him forcing footballs. They've put him in a position where he's had to do that. But let's keep in mind, like it's a whole team, and both sides of the ball are failing. You know, we want to just look at the offense because that's the way they're built to win. And we want to examine the quarterback, and we should, and we have. But the defense for 2 weeks in a row gets no turnovers and no sacks. And yesterday, they couldn't even force a punt. The punter for the Chargers was out there all day, but it was because he was kicking extra points because their primary place kicker, Nick Novak, was injured. I mean, the Cleveland Browns are the worst team in football. They're the worst organization in this decade, right? They've won 1 game since Hugh Jackson became their head coach. They're the only winless team out there. Do you know how many games the Cleveland Browns have lost by 20 points this year?
How many?
1.
They've been blown out.
One time they've lost by 20 points, and the Cowboys have lost by 20 points 3 times in a row. In 12 days, they've lost 3 games by 20 points. So that brings up another thing. That brings up the thing I mentioned earlier. This team, not these players, but this team quit on Wade Phillips in the middle of his season. Is this team quitting? Do we see quit in this team? When Keenan Allen catches an out and dodges 5 Cowboy defenders to the end zone and is barely touched by any of them, was that maximum effort from all those guys? So are they quitting or are they just bad players? Because those are really the 2 choices.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to put it that way, and I think, I mean, they're not competitive, and you're right. Wade was a bounce because they were. I think this year's team right now is 5-6, and Wade's team, of course, at that point was 1-7.
1-7 in Green Bay,
and so the record,
and the quit was obvious.
Yeah, the record started to kind of pile up, and I think there's still some thought. Here's what they're trying to hang their hat on, Ed, and this is kind of an embarrassing part of this to me is, and Jason brought it up yesterday, they have been in all these games at halftime. Now, that's a really sad thing to have to say. That it was 3-0.
They were down 3 to the Falcons at the half. They actually led Philadelphia at the half, and they're down 3-0 to the Chargers.
Correct.
And again, from what I saw from my vantage point on the field, this is a team that whether it's in the bench area or it's on the field, there is very little emotion on this team. I think it's a team that plays with 0 confidence right now. And we all know not only does Zeke Elliott bring playmaking, but he brings a charisma to the locker room during the week and practices. He's kind of the Michael Irvin in that regard, you know? Who are the leaders on this team? Who are the emotional leaders? Even Dez doesn't throw a fit anymore, right?
Even after he made
didn't even
catch.
Get targeted in the first half.
Yeah.
He and Beasley get 0 targets in the first half.
And you didn't see Dez screaming at anybody?
And I've criticized him for being disruptive at times, but I almost think now they'd be better off if he would react in some kind of way like that.
Ed Werder calling on, I like this, for Dez Bryant to be a little more disruptive on the sideline.
When Heath blew up the receiver Ty Williams on the sideline, was there any kind of congratulations, any emotion? Not that I saw. The only emotion I ever saw was when Rod Smith scored his first NFL touchdown. Jalen Smith met him on the sidelines and was extremely excited for what his brother had just achieved. But in general, there's no emotion on this team. None.
Yeah. And Ed, it's hard for me to believe that you would say that when there's a coach over there really giving some aggressive clapping. Mike Lombardi, our friend from The Ringer now.
Former general manager in the NFL.
He refers to Jason as the clapper.
Thinks that's all he does.
And I would say Lombardi's become one of the biggest Cowboys critics out there, especially of Jason Garrett over these last few weeks. Ed, you brought up the defense. Let me just say a quick word on that. Phillip Rivers continues to put up huge numbers. Sadly, Phillip will finish his career maybe after this season and will not have accomplished, it'll be a little bit like Romo, although he will end up with more playoff success than Romo. But known as a guy who put up huge numbers but was never quite able to break through and win big in the playoffs. My goodness, though, at whatever age he is, 36, 37 years old, Ed, he's still firing it down the field in that strange way that he delivers the ball. And 434 yards, 3 touchdowns, 27-33. And really the only time the Cowboys got their hands on the football, the sun. Boy, the sun always rears its ugly head out there. Poor Jordan Lewis. Did you see him?
Yep.
Could have called for fair catch on that interception. I mean, they threw one right to him.
Early in the game, when it could have made a difference.
When it could have done something, and he wasn't able to pull it in. And Ed, the pass rush, which has been one of their calling cards, I believe this team has 30 sacks on the season, which puts them up in the upper regions.
The Chargers, yeah.
Yeah. And they were not able to really, think about that. This is not a mobile quarterback. This is a fiery quarterback who likes to chirp at everybody throughout the game. It's not a mobile guy. And yet, do you remember anybody? There were very few times. I want to say Damian Wilson had a hurry at some point. Maybe our DeMarcus Lawrence had one hurry in that ball game. But in terms of putting some licks on the quarterback, just didn't happen. He was very comfortable throughout that game.
I think they just didn't force him to hold the ball at all in the secondary. We know it's a young secondary. They invested 3 draft choices, including their second and third round picks, on defensive backs as they went through this, offseason makeover where they basically got rid of everybody who played back there, except for Byron Jones, a first round pick, and Jeff Heath. But I don't see any ability to cover receivers back there. They had Skandrick on Keenan Allen early in the game to no avail. His primary receiver was open in almost every situation, and so you didn't force a guy who can't really protect himself with his athleticism against a pass rush to feel any sense of urgency to get the ball out. If you're not creating pressure on these quarterbacks, these elite guys, like these highly accomplished guys like Phillip Rivers, if you're not putting them under duress, they're not just going to throw you the football.
No.
And we're seeing that right now. Whatever happened to David Irving and DeMarcus Lawrence as elite, and the Charger offensive line is not great, and the Cowboys were just never able to do anything of consequence on defense.
Think about how they were able to purposely be one-dimensional, even though they didn't have to be. They have a good running back, and the Chargers just were like, you know what? Why in the world would we sit back here and hand the ball off and maybe get 3 or 4 yards when we can get chunk plays of it? I was looking at, I had it written down earlier. It was 21, 27, 43.
I think 45. They had 8 20-yard plays in the game.
Yeah, and that's what everything we saw from that offense. And that's not a great team. They came in 4-6. They're now 5-6. That's the same as the Cowboys.
They've won 5 out of 7.
They aren't on a roll, but I'm just saying everything we saw, the explosion of that offense, the explosiveness, is what the Cowboys aren't.
And this is a team that, don't forget, this is a franchise that's, playing in Los Angeles in a bad situation, a tiny little stadium. They have no real support, whether they're home or on the road.
I think on the road they probably feel better. I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing.
I know
to
Anthony
be at
Lynn's
home.
from here. He had about 200 people there in Charger.
Yeah.
But
I like Anthony.
But don't forget that the Chargers had to play a game on Sunday afternoon and then travel to play on a short week against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, which was the first time Phillip Rivers had ever done that. And they come in here and they just mop you up in your own stadium on a national platform in a game that means everything to you and your season, and you just get blown out in the second half again. The defense to me has played poorly, tackles poorly, creates no consistent pass rush, no short field turnovers for an offense that's struggling, and it's just an emotionally flat team that just is unable to compete in the second half of games and futile in the first half. I still think that a big part of the defense's failure is they just lose hope. They've got no point. The Cowboys have no points on the board at half, and then they get scored on early in the second half, and they know the game's over.
Well, we could see a situation where if this continues, Ed, somebody is going to get fired, and while it might not be Garrett, it could end up being Marinelli. And is that fair? I don't know. I mean, that side of the ball is pretty awful right now. Now, it goes hand in hand. One of the things we've seen with Zeke Elliott is the ball control allows them to keep the offense out there, keep drives going, not expose the defense. That was the recipe for winning last season, and they don't have that.
This team has one way of winning. They've over the last 3 or 4 years, the end of the Romo era, the beginning of the Prescott Elliott era, they've demonstrated that they know one way to win. That's to dominate with the run game, especially on first down, to win time of possession, to keep their defense off the field for up to a dozen plays a game. They're on the field when the Cowboys are at their best. And it wasn't that long ago we saw it, right? We saw it against Kansas City. They did exactly that. Witten had what I thought was the perfect comment. When we are who we want to be, that's how the game looks. And that's not how any of the games have looked since Zeke Elliott went out. The defense has failed without Sean Lee. I'm not so sure they would succeed with Sean Lee. And I think the other part that gets overlooked, and this point I think needs to be made now, is we don't see any great young players, do we, on this football team? No great young leadership, no great young performances. This is where picking guys like Randy Gregory in the second round and picking Jalen Smith in the second round bite the Cowboys.
Project picks.
These guys should
developmental picks.
These
is what
guys,
you call those.
Well, it's Jerry making a decision based on freak athletic talent and not putting the proper emphasis on the reason that player is available at this time when ordinarily he wouldn't be. And in both cases, one was medical and one was the off-the-field conduct of a player who will probably never wear a Cowboys uniform again.
I mean, it's somewhat medical, like medical marijuana.
All right. But really, those are two positions. Those are two spots where those guys should be key defensive players for this team. Young, emerging guys, and instead they're nowhere to be seen on game day.
No, they're not.
Well, I mean, Jalen Smith is out there.
He's out there running around, and he actually made a couple of decent plays in that game yesterday.
Yeah, but he's not right. And
no.
I watched him walk out there yesterday, and he walks out with a limp, much less, you're trying to change a direction out of this guy and expect him to make explosive plays. And it's not his fault. It's not his fault at all. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying he's doomed to failure. I am saying Randy Gregory is doomed to failure, by the way, just in case there's any question. But I am not saying
you're right.
that.
No, you're a good point,
that's
though.
Randy Gregory's fault.
Yeah.
And it's also the organization's fault for overvaluing him.
But as far as dynamic young players, let me give you a couple of candidates. And this guy had a really bad day yesterday. See, the problem is, one year you'll think, oh my gosh, you hit on Anthony Brown. I mean, how did you? This is great.
6th-round pick,
and then he's been really bad.
He's been
lately,
exposed all year
in such a bad way. He's
in a bigger role. He's been exposed as a role player.
That is true. Jordan Lewis might have a future. That was a bad game for him, but he appears that he might be something down the road. They can't even get our buddy Cheeto Awuzie. I mean, my goodness, he's had all sorts of injuries that he's
dressed yesterday.
There's a that's great. I'm glad he had a uniform.
He knows how to put it on still.
He does know how to put a uniform on. I think there's just so you know, Ed, I'm hearing I think there's something going on with him in terms of I think there's some sort of disagreement perhaps with the scouting community and the coaches
as to what position he should play?
What he is. Not just in terms of how he's being handled. I think there's some interesting stuff going on with him. But I think you might raise a good point. Who are Collins, I guess, is hanging in there at right tackle. He's a young player. But, who are you building around? Who are the core players? Witten's not getting any younger. He might play another couple of years or a year or two, but he's not getting any younger. You would hope Dak and Zeke are the guys you build around. Zeke is not available. Zeke, in a sense, what we now know, and you predicted it, I didn't quite predict it. In fact, I thought there might be, maybe I put too much faith in Garrett and some of these other folks. The season was lost in that New York courtroom. Apparently, now that we look back, 3.5 weeks ago, and we've had all our legal scholars on, but this season really turned into, think about it, when we think back on this season, and this may be good for Garrett. What I'm about to say. This season will have been all about Zeke, court cases, protest, Jerry versus Goodell. There's so much other stuff going on that in some sense the football has been secondary to all this. I know
that's a problem, isn't it? That shouldn't be the case.
It's a big problem. I think that's probably a good thing for Garrett, though. I think the fact that that will be used as some sort of excuse or mitigating factor if this thing continues to go like it is, and let's say they finish 7-9. I think that's a very possible thing. If they finish 7-9 this season,
where are the 2 wins when Zeke comes back?
That's right. Zeke comes back and they roll to the finish. And let's be honest, that final game of the season, the Eagles will probably be sitting everybody and not try. They might get I'd bring Kellen back. Is Kellen? He's not around anymore.
He's around.
Oh, Kellen is.
Yeah.
I'd get him involved because I could in a game like that he could throw for 400 or 500 yards.
Well, like I said before, I don't think there is a team that the Cowboys can beat playing the way they're playing right now. And whether that changes, I can't see them beating the Redskins this coming week. The Redskins, despite all the injuries they've had and all the players they've lost, they compete and they score points.
Wait a second. You mean that Thompson guy got hurt and the Redskins still go out there and put points on the board and run the ball? I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, you don't have to just wave the white flag.
Okay.
It's not required.
I did not realize. Real quick though, before we finish, I do want to. I want you to take our listeners sort of inside, because most people will not have a chance to sort of be in that box as you described it. Sort of right back there behind the benches. Now, Ed, is there a restricted zone that you kind of have to stay to the edge of, and then? Tell us, you can't tell us all your secrets, but what is that situation like? In to get your injury news, for instance, how do you sort of make that happen during a game, and then be able to get on the radio and share that? And for people that don't know, Ed is doing about 5 or 6 games this year for Westwood One. And who was your crew yesterday?
Up in the booth?
Yeah.
Tony Baselli was the player analyst. In the past, I've worked with the great Kevin Harlan. And I've worked with Kurt Warner, the Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah. So yesterday was the first time with this other crew. But
who was the play-by-play? Okay, I got you. Yep.
John, who
I know John.
They were in a difficult position identifying numbers because of their location, the booth location of the booth.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the role that I have is different. It's different covering a game down there than it is up in the press box. It's much more immediate, obviously, particularly when a player gets injured. Like I found myself yesterday I was spending probably too much time with a Chargers kicking situation early in the game, and belatedly noticed that Zach Martin was not in the game, and then had to hurry across the field. And you can't go directly across the field. They really discourage that.
I would like to see you kind of darting across the field.
They discourage that. There's a yellow dotted line, and you're supposed to stay behind that. And we mostly recognize that. And you always the danger down there is that moving cart with the TV camera on it that goes up and down the sidelines.
That would worry me.
Yeah, you never know when that might be a threat to your safety. And then the other thing is there's somebody designated by each PR staff to provide injury updates to you so that you can get them on the air as quickly as possible.
You holler at them?
I did have to holler at Jamal LaFrance yesterday from the Chargers to get his. He was pretty engaged in the game and kind of standing in the middle of the bench area. Most of these people stand more toward one edge or the other, so we can have access to them. And I was like screaming his name, but of course there's 90,000 disillusioned people in the audience at the time, so it's hard to overcome it. And other people,
do we have audio of you
apparently
doing
they have
that?
a lot of people named Jamal on the sideline because a lot of people looked at me, but Jamal did not. And anyway, so I finally got his attention, and we sorted out the kicking thing. But that's kind of how it works. You have a microphone on, and it's not live all the time. You're talking to a producer, and they can tell you what they're seeing from up there. And direct you around as they see necessary, try and help you out. And at the same time, I'm down there, and I know they're probably having a hard time seeing numbers from up there, so I'm telling them whether it's Drew Kaiser, number 8, who's coming out to place kick, or it's Nick Novak, number 9.
You're telling the producer that.
Yeah, or I'm making observations based on injuries as to who's in the game and who's not, and then we'll go find out what the story is. Almost every time a guy initially is hurt, they almost always say he's questionable to return.
Okay, that's the immediate thing. Okay, well, you do a nice job on that, and I've enjoyed that, and I know that's got to be kind of fun. And unlike your TV days, you can wear comfortable clothing. And we've got one friend that used to be in the radio business with us, Frito and I, who puts on like a suit and tie and like dress shoes and runs around doing sideline work. And I've never quite understood that, but I do like that you put on your Travis Matthew and you're comfortable down there.
He's that guy's dressed for his next job.
That's right. He's always on a job interview.
But I always see when I first started doing this, I was thinking, what can I wear? How casual can I be? And I kept remembering all the times that Tony Baselli, who's up for the Hall of Fame as a Jaguars former left tackle, does this job when he's not up in the booth. And I always remember he's just kind of very casual and maybe jeans or khakis and his shirt's untucked. And I thought about that. That's the way I normally dress. But just for the first time back to Jerry World for me this year, it just didn't seem right. So I wore a sport coat and a dress shirt and some nice like stone-colored jeans. It was a fantastic look, I think.
Stone-colored jeans.
If you want to see some photos, they're on my Facebook page.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's one thing I can't wait to do is to jump on your Facebook page. All right, we do have, and because the Cowboys always play in these night games or special games or whatever, we're on a different schedule right now. We will be recording most likely on Friday morning after Thursday's game against the Washington Redskins.
I want to give an alarming stat to end my contribution.
Please.
So you tell me when my contribution is over.
I'm ready to end your contribution.
So
now.
my ending contribution is an ominous note, as it should be on this occasion, given the funeral hymns we're hearing in the background as we speak. Dak Prescott in games played outside the division, such as yesterday, now has a 13-5 record. He handles non-division opponents pretty well. Against the teams that play him every year and know him best, he is 5-4 with the Washington Redskins coming to town.
5-4.
5-4.
Okay,
not as good as 13-5.
No. That's not as good a percentage. Even I can.
I didn't know. I knew you went to law school. I didn't know how you were on math.
No, that's true. All right, Ed, tremendous work. That went by quickly. I hope it does for our listeners as well. Remember, you can always sign up and listen to us, Apple Podcasts. You can go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeart, so many different places. Frito continuing to try to get us on Spotify. I know that's become just a primary concern of his in life. Ed, excellent work. Proud of your sideline work yesterday, and good to see you back with the Jones boys. I know Stephen and Jerry, despite your searing commentary lately, we're happy to see you. And in fact, up in the press box where I was sort of doing my thing, members of the organization continued to come up to me to say, how can we how can we be more involved with you guys? And that's always a fun thing. So Ed,
they could play better football to start.
Ed, let's for once try to be kind. All right, say goodnight, Ed.
Good night, Ed.
That's it, folks.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful, you never wanted more. But they tend to leave you as time has its way, and they leave behind little mouths to feed and raise. And the days go by so slowly when it used to go so fast. Whiskey does not taste as good when you only pour one glass. There's just no way of knowing which way the cold wind blows. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes.
It's one thing falling in love with a house, picturing yourself moving in and calling it home, and quite another navigating the world of price negotiating, mortgage lenders, and finding the budget that works best for you. An agent who's a Realtor can make understanding that world easier. Realtors have the expertise, access to proprietary data, and tools to help you get from imagining living somewhere to actually doing it. That's the kind of help we can provide. Because that's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over for dinner with free delivery with no hidden fees or markups. That's groceries plus napkins plus that vegetable chopper to make things a bit easier. Plus, members save on gas to go meet them in their neck of the woods. Plus, when you're ready for the ultimate sign of friendship, start a show together with your included Paramount Plus subscription. Walmart Plus members save on this plus so much more. Start a 30-day free trial at walmartplus.com. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. See Walmart Plus terms and conditions.